blood stains the dust of Red Bluff, Colorado Territory, 1878, where Nico Blackstone, an Apache tracker, and Leona Dane, a woman betrayed by her own kin, forge a bond against a world of lies. Their story, woven with courage and sacrifice, begins in shadows, but ends in a light that could redefine justice. What secrets will they uncover, and at what cost? Join their journey, a tale of survival and redemption that will grip your heart. Subscribe now and share where you're listening from in the comments. Will their truth survive the fire? Stay until the end to find out what rises from the ashes of betrayal. Dust hung heavy in the air, curling like a ghost across the cracked earth of Red Bluff, Colorado Territory, 1878. It clung to boots, seeped into lungs, and settled in the silence of men who spoke only when the wind stopped howling. Nico Blackstone leaned against a weathered post outside Judge Dane's grand white estate, his Apache eyes scanning the horizon where the sun bled gold into the canyon's jagged edge. His arms, crossed over a chest, hardened by years of tracking and fighting, bore scars that told stories no one cared to hear. He'd ridden the borderlands all morning, chasing whispers of stolen rifles. Judge Dane's claim, though Nico knew better. The judge's enemies weren't thieves. They were men like him, pushed to desperation by a land stripped of their blood. The great house loomed above, its lantern swaying on porch beams, spilling warm light that never reached Nico. Inside, piano notes drifted, brittle as glass, mingling with laughter and the clink of whiskey tumblers. Leona Dane's engagement supper was in full swing, a deal sealed to the mayor's son, a man with a jaw like iron, but hands too soft for honest work. Nico wasn't invited. 9 years he'd served the judge, tracker, fixer, shadow. Yet in Dane's ledger, he remained a savage, tolerated, but never trusted. His loyalty was coin, his silence a shield. But no deed erased the stain of his birth. He remembered Leona at 17, barefoot in the orchard, sleeves rolled, her freckled face catching sunlight. Unlike her father, her gaze held no cruelty, only a curiosity that didn't flinch. She was 24 now, her features sharp and striking, but her eyes still carried that trapped defiance. Through the window, framed by velvet curtains, she stood beside her betrothed, nodding to his words with a smile as hollow as a dry well. Her glance met Nico's for a fleeting moment, a wordless spark passing between them before he turned away, the weight of it too heavy to hold. Night deepened, and Nico retreated to the bunkhouse, stripping off trail-worn clothes. He washed in a tin basin, the water turning rust red, though the dirt he carried never truly left. His muscles ached, not from labor, but from a life spent braced against the world. Sitting on his cot, bare feet on the cold floor, he listened as the party's noise faded. Horses whinnied, laughter thinned. Then, a sound cut through. A muffled thud, voices low and urgent, a scrape like something dragged. Knife in hand, Nico stepped into the moonlight. The estate was too still. At the servant's door, he found it ajar, dirt disturbed, boot tracks fresh, and a drag mark snaking toward the ravine. His gut twisted. A scrap of pale silk lay in the dust. Leona's. He sprinted past the orchard, down the slope where trees thinned, following tracks that veered east toward the Badlands, lawless gulches where men answered to no one. At the stables, his Mustang, Ghost, sensed his urgency, eyes wide, breath snorting. Nico saddled fast, no bags, just his rifle, knife, and a rage that burned cold and deep. As he passed the main house, the judge's study glowed amber. Voices leaked through. "She's gone," one said. "Taken," a pause. Then Dane's voice, flat as stone. "She's not my blood. Never was. She's the price." Nico's blood iced. Leona, discarded like a bad bet. He rode into the night, a shadow on fire, the canyon swallowing his hoofbeats. Meanwhile, in San Pedro Canyon, Mara Collins, a young widow, rode her gray horse through the desert, a swaddled infant strapped to her chest. Her husband, a miner, had been killed in a wagon robbery, and whispers warned her to flee before the bandits returned. She sought Tahan, a Comanche warrior, a shadow who'd once saved her husband's life. As the sun sank behind red rocks, shouts echoed below. 3 masked riders bound a bare-chested man to a stone post, blood pooling on the sand. His long black hair and Comanche beads marked him, Tahan. The bandits laughed, readying a torch. Mara tethered her horse, her pulse hammering. She recognized these men, the same who'd killed her husband. No time to hesitate. She fashioned a rope from the baby's blanket and, from the cliff's edge, flung it, the loop catching the torchbearer's wrist. He fell, fire scattering. Tahan broke free, a beast unleashed, seizing a knife and ending the man in one swift strike. Mara fired her old Springfield, one bullet grazing a second bandit's shoulder, the third fleeing into the dark. She slid down the slope, horse screaming, and met Tahan's wary gaze. "Who are you?" he rasped. "A widow," she said, "and you'll die if I don't bind those wounds." In that moment, 2 worlds collided. Nico and Leona, Mara and Tahan, bound by betrayal, racing toward a truth that could burn everything down. Moonlight carved sharp shadows across the Badlands, where the earth swallowed sound and mercy alike. Nico Blackstone rode hard, Ghost's hooves pounding the dry gulch, each step kicking up dust that glowed silver under the stars. The trail led east, deeper into a lawless sprawl of jagged cliffs and bone-dry ravines. Leona's silk scrap burned in his mind, a fragile thread pulling him toward her. The judge's words echoed colder still. "She's not my blood." The price. Nico's grip tightened on the reins, his knife heavy at his hip. He wasn't just chasing Leona, he was chasing a truth that could unravel Red Bluff's rotting core. The tracks veered toward a collapsed mine shaft, half hidden by thorny brush. Nico dismounted, tethering Ghost to a twisted juniper. His boots crunched softly on chalky soil as he crouched, reading the ground. 3 horses, 1 riderless, and a set of smaller prints. Leona's dragged, fighting. A broken branch snagged another shred of her dress, pale as a ghost's whisper. His pulse quickened. She was alive. He crept forward, rifle slung low, blade drawn, the night's chill biting his sweat-damp skin. Voices drifted from the mine's mouth, crude laughter, a grunt, then a muffled cry. Nico's vision narrowed, rage coiling like a rattler. Inside, 2 men lounged by a flickering lantern, their faces shadowed, but their cruelty clear. A third was absent, likely scouting. Leona lay bound on the dirt floor, wrists raw, dress torn, her eyes wide but unyielding. One thug muttered, "Hold her still, damn it," while the other sneered, "Girl's got no sense to scream no more." Nico moved like a storm breaking. He burst through the brush, knife flashing, driving it under the first man's ribs before he could reach his pistol. The second scrambled for a shotgun, but Nico's fist cracked his jaw, then his throat, dropping him choking. Silence fell, heavy as iron. Nico knelt beside Leona, cutting her ropes. "It's me," he said, voice low, steady. Her lips trembled, but no words came. He paused at her ankles, noticing blood between her thighs. His stomach lurched. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, whispering, "It's just my time." Relief hit him like a desert wind. He wrapped her in his coat, her hands shaking as she clutched it. "I thought you wouldn't come," she murmured. "I did," he said, lifting her into his arms, her face buried into his shoulder as he carried her into the blinding moonlight. Across the territory, in San Pedro Canyon, Mara Collins crouched in a shallow cave, her infant charge sleeping against her chest. Tahan sat opposite, his wounds bandaged with strips of her skirt, his dark eyes tracking the darkness beyond. The Comanche warrior's breath was steady now, but his voice carried a blade's edge. "They'll come for me," he said. "Raleigh's men don't leave loose ends." Mara's fingers tightened on her Springfield. "They killed my husband. They don't get you, too." Tahan's gaze softened, seeing the old rope scars on her wrists. "You fight like you've lost everything." She met his eyes. "Haven't I?" They moved at dawn, Mara leading her gray horse, Tahan scouting ahead. He found a bloodied map in a dead bandit's pocket. A mining claim stamped with Judge Raleigh's seal, her husband's forged signature scrawled in the corner. Mara's knees buckled, tears mixing with dust. "He died for this," she whispered. Tahan crouched beside her. "He died because Raleigh plays God with paper and blood." They agreed to head for Santa Fe to find a federal judge who'd listen. But the canyon's shadow grew long, and hoofbeats echoed. Raleigh's mercenaries closing in. Back in the Badlands, Nico and Leona camped in a narrow arroyo, rock spines shielding them. He built a fire from dried roots, its glow catching the defiance in Leona's eyes. "You knew where they'd take me," she said, sipping from a tin cup. "I know men like them," Nico replied, cleaning his knife. "This is where they hide when they think no one's brave enough to follow." She stared into the flames. "Why did he do it?" "My father." Nico's hand stilled. "He's not your father. I heard him say it. You're a loose end, Leona. You know too much." Her throat worked, but no tears came. "He always hated me," she said. "I just didn't know how much." Nico sharpened his rifle, the scrape of steel on stone filling the silence. Leona pulled his coat tighter. "He'll come for us," Nico nodded. "I know." Her fingers brushed his, a fleeting touch. "I don't want to go back." His eyes met hers, hard as flint. "You won't." As the fire crackled, the Badlands whispered of pursuit, and two souls, bound by betrayal, steeled themselves for the fight ahead. Dawn broke over the Badlands, painting the cliffs in streaks of fire and shadow. But for Nico Blackstone and Leona Dane, the fight was far from over. The promise he'd made, "You won't go back," hung heavy as they rode ghost through twisting trails, the Mustang's hooves kicking up dust that tasted of iron and resolve. Leona clung to Nico's back, her fingers tight against his ribs, her breath steady despite the weight of betrayal sinking deeper. The judge's men would come, and the truth they carried was a spark that could ignite Red Bluff or burn them both to ash. They reached a weathered cabin by dusk, tucked behind wild oaks on a hill overlooking the town's white church steeple. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin as a whispered secret. Nico dismounted, helping Leona down, her legs unsteady but her eyes sharp. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco and old paper, maps pinned to walls like scars of forgotten borders. Glenn, a grizzled ex-ranger with a glass eye, emerged from a side room, his holster low, his gaze cutting through Nico. "Didn't expect you back, and sure as hell not with her," he said, voice rough as gravel. Leona stepped forward, chin high. "I'm not his daughter. Not anymore." Glenn's eye narrowed, but Nico nodded. "Trouble's coming fast. She needs a place to rest." Glenn handed Nico a folded parchment, stained and creased. "From a courthouse clerk who owes me. Dane's land deeds, updated last quarter." Nico spread it on the table, Leona at his side. Her finger traced a line. Her mother's land, marked as Dane's, dated 2 months after her death. "He forged it," she said, voice flat but trembling beneath. "It was meant for me." Glenn muttered. A man who rewrites the past for power doesn't stop at land. Nico's jaw tightened. There's more. A safe in his study, under the floorboards. Leona's seen him use it. She nodded. The code's 1865, the year he bought his robe. That night, under a sky bruised purple, they rode back to the Dane estate, keeping to back trails where mesquite clawed at their boots. The house was dim, staff sent away after the engagement party's chaos. They slipped through the servant's door, the study reeking of stale whiskey and gun oil. Nico pried up the floorboard, revealing an iron-bound safe. Leona's fingers shook as she turned the dial. Click, 1865. The latch gave. Inside, stacks of deeds, cash, and a black book, its pages dense with names, payments, signatures, Dane's web of bribes, and blood. Leona pulled a letter, her mother's handwriting, her breath catching. He kept this to bury her truth. Nico's hand grazed her shoulder. Now we hold it. A twig snapped outside. Drop it, a voice growled. Sheriff Rook stood in the doorway, revolver gleaming, flanked by deputies Raleigh and Boone, their eyes hungry as coyotes. Trespass, theft, sedition, Rook sneered. Leona's voice cut back, cold as steel. Sedition? What law's that, Rook? He smirked. Your father's law, girl. You're no Dane now. Nico stepped forward. She's not the one who should be arrested. Rook's pistol twitched, but Leona moved faster, ducking low, her hand finding the pistol Nico had slipped her that morning. Nico grabbed the desk lamp, hurling it at the curtains. Glass shattered, oil ignited, flames licking up the wood-paneled walls. Rook fired, the bullet grazing Nico's arm. Nico charged, slamming Boone into a bookshelf, law books crashing like thunder. Leona fired, clipping Raleigh's leg. Nico tackled Rook, his knife slicing a gash along the sheriff's ribs. Run! Nico shouted, but Leona stood firm, grabbing the black book. Together, they burst through the front door, smoke curling behind them as the manor burned, a fire born of accident or justice. Across the territory, Mara Collins and Tahan hid in a canyon's shadow, the map of Raleigh's mining claim clutched tight. Hoofbeats grew louder. 6 of Raleigh's mercenaries, Winchesters glinting. Mara's infant stirred, and Tahan's eyes darkened. They'll kill the child if they take us. Mara's jaw set. Then we don't get caught. They fled through Santa Cruz's hidden paths, Tahan's knowledge of the land, their only shield. The map burned in Mara's mind, her husband's forged signature, a lie that cost his life. Back in Red Bluff, Nico and Leona reached Ghost, galloping into the orchard as shouts and gunfire chased them. A bullet tore through Nico's coat, but he leaned low, spurring the Mustang into the night. The fire's glow faded behind them, but the black book in Leona's hands held power to burn brighter. If this story of courage and betrayal speaks to you, please subscribe and share it. Your support keeps these tales alive. The road ahead promised no mercy, but Nico and Leona, like Mara and Tahan, carried a truth too heavy to bury, and they'd fight to see it dawn. The night swallowed Red Bluff's flames, but the black book in Leona's hands burned brighter, a ledger of sins that could topple empires. Nico spurred Ghost through the high desert, the Mustang's breath steaming in the cold dawn air. Leona's arms locked around his waist. Her grip wasn't fear, but exhaustion. Her body bruised, but her will unbent. They rode toward Santa Fe, where a circuit judge might hear their truth, but the trail stretched mean and merciless. Canyons that ate light, ridges sharp as knives. Every shadow hid a threat, and the dust behind them whispered of pursuit. By midday, Nico's side ached, blood seeping through his coat from the graze in the manor fight. He didn't speak of it, but Leona noticed, her eyes narrowing as she handed him a strip of her torn petticoat. "Bind it," she said, voice steady as stone. He tied it tight, gritting his teeth, and they pressed on. following ghost paths only an Apache could read. The terrain widened into red hills, then folded into arroyos where the sun scorched the earth to bone. At a dry creek bed, Nico paused, reading fresh hoofprints. 4 riders, moving fast. "They're close," he muttered, scanning the horizon. Leona's hand rested on the pistol at her hip, no longer hidden. Let them come. On the 3rd day, trouble found them at Apache's Spine, a narrow pass where cliffs loomed like silent judges. Hoofbeats thundered, and 4 masked mercenaries burst from the brush, Winchesters raised. A warning shot kicked dust near Ghost's hooves. Nico veered hard, driving the horse behind a sandstone ledge. They dismounted, crouching low as pebbles sprayed from gunfire above. Leona's breath was fast, but focused, her fingers steady on her rifle. "They're not law," Nico said, voice low. "They shoot to kill." She nodded, eyes hard. "So do I now." Nico crawled along the ridge, silent as a shadow, circling wide. 2 gunmen advanced, careless, one lighting a cigar like the fight was already won. Nico struck. A rock to the face, then a knife through the kidney. The man crumpled without a sound. The second turned, only to meet Nico's fist, his jaw cracking under the blow. Gunfire echoed as the remaining 2 closed on Leona's position. She waited, heart pounding, then rose, rifle cracking. 1 mercenary fell, shoulder shredded. The last bolted, but Nico's shot caught his calf, dropping him screaming into the dust. They regrouped, Leona's hand steady now, no tremble. "I aim to scare him," she said, lowering the rifle. Nico glanced at the wounded man. Fear's not enough out here. She met his gaze, something shifting in her. Less the girl from the orchard, more a woman forged in fire. They rode on, camping that night in a dry canyon, rock spires guarding them like sentinels. The stars burned cold, and Nico sharpened his blade while Leona studied the black book's pages. "Judge Hurst," she said, pointing to a name. Dane called him untouchable. Nico nodded. "He's our man, outside Santa Fe. 1 more day." In San Pedro Canyon, Mara Collins and Tahan pressed through hidden trails, the mining map their only weapon against Raleigh's lies. The infant whimpered against Mara's chest, her gray horse stumbling on loose shale. Tahan scouted ahead, his wound slowing him, but his eyes were sharp. At a narrow pass, 6 of Raleigh's men ambushed them, rifles spitting lead. Tahan pulled Mara behind a boulder, his voice grim. "They want the map, and our blood." Mara clutched the child tighter, her Springfield ready. "They get neither." Tahan moved like a ghost, slipping through the brush to flank the attackers. He lit a fuse on a stolen dynamite stick, hurling it into the pass. The explosion roared, rocks tumbling, burying 3 men in a cloud of red dust. Mara fired, her bullet grazing a 4th, but a shot clipped her shoulder, blood soaking her sleeve. Tahan dragged her to cover, his own chest bleeding anew. "Stay down," he growled, but Mara shook her head, firing again, her aim true. The last 2 fled, and silence returned, broken only by the child's soft cries. As dusk fell, Nico and Leona reached a sheepherder's ruined cabin, its stone walls holding faint warmth. Nico's wound had reopened, fever creeping in. Leona boiled water, grinding sage into a poultice, her hand steady despite the blood. "You're burning up," she said, pressing it to his side. He clenched his jaw but didn't flinch. "I've had worse." She looked at him, eyes fierce. "Don't die before we finish this." He met her gaze, a faint smile breaking through. "Not planning to." The fire crackled, and the black book lay between them, its secrets heavy as the coming fight. Santa Fe was close, but so were the wolves, and the truth they carried would demand blood before it spoke. The fire's embers glowed faintly in the herder's cabin, But the black book's weight pressed heavily. Its secrets a promise of justice or a sentence of death. Nico Blackstone and Leona Dane rode out at dawn, the trail to Santa Fe stretching like a scar across the high desert. Ghost's hooves churned red earth. Nico's fever dulled, but his wound still weeping beneath Leona's sage poultice. Her hand rested on her pistol, eyes scanning the horizon, where dust clouds warned of pursuit. They carried truth now, but truth in these lands was a blade that cut both ways. They reached Judge Hurst's adobe ranch by dusk, a low structure nestled among cottonwoods, its simplicity stark against Red Bluff's corruption. Hurst, silver-haired and weary, sat on the porch, a journal in his lap. Leona dismounted, clutching the black book. "Judge Hurst," she called, voice steady. "We need 10 minutes." He took the book, pages turning slow as he read Dane's crimes. Land theft, bribes, murders veiled as charity. His eyes darkened. "This is treason," he said. Leona's hands tightened. "I'll testify. Every name, every lie." Hurst nodded. "We ride at dusk. You'll be under protection until the hearing." But the wolves were closer than the law. Nico spotted them. Rook and 4 riders cresting the southern ridge, their shadows long and hungry. "They're here," he said, rifle ready. Hurst armed 2 ranch hands barricading the gate. Leona packed the book's pages into a satchel, her fingers steady despite the coming storm. "I thought justice would feel different," she said, loading bullets. Nico's gaze was iron. "It's just quieter violence." Twilight brought the first shot, a bullet burying itself in the adobe. Nico fired back, dropping a shooter behind a mesquite. Chaos erupted. Gunfire split the air, dust choking the light. Rook charged the side gate, but Nico leapt from the stable roof, tackling him to the ground. They fought like beasts, blood mixing with dirt. Rook's knife flashed, but Leona's pistol barked, her shot piercing his chest. He fell, surprise frozen on his face. The remaining riders fled, leaving bullet casings and silence. Leona dropped her gun, hands shaking. Nico caught her. "I didn't want to kill," she whispered. "You did what you had to," he said. "That's freedom." 3 days later, in Santa Fe's territorial court, Leona stood before a silent crowd, her voice cutting through the oak-paneled room. She named every man, every deal, every drop of blood Dane had spilled. Hurst presented the black book, its pages damning. The courtroom held its breath. Within a week, warrants were issued, Dane's estate seized, his name turned to ash. He died in prison, a knife in his gut, silent to the end. In San Pedro Canyon, Mara Collins stood alone, the mining map delivered to a federal judge. Tahan's sacrifice, his dynamite burying Raleigh's men, had cleared her path. She'd testified, her husband's forged signature the key to Raleigh's downfall. His empire crumbled, and mines returned to the land's rightful heirs. But Tahan's absence was a wound that didn't close, his Comanche beads heavy in her hand. 3 years later, in 1881, Nico and Leona built a life in Sacaro del Norte, a valley where cottonwoods gleamed silver under moonlight. Their shack, half swallowed by dust, became a home. They adopted Clara, a child left at their door, her whimpers easing under Leona's care. Nico hunted, teaching Leona to track silently, while she planted beans and lupines, coaxing life from stubborn soil. Travelers came, drifters, ex-soldiers, lost souls, and left fed. Some healed. A girl, barefoot and bleeding, left wildflowers above their hearth. Leona smiled. Our kind of church. Mara, in Santa Fe, ran Red Bluff home, a haven for orphans. She took the name Greyhawk, honoring Tahan. Each night, she sat under a cottonwood, the child she'd saved, now named Clara, on her chest, his beads and scorched rope beside her. Locals swore they saw a rider in the canyon, hair black as night, but Mara only smiled. "Justice doesn't die," she'd say. "It rides on the wind." Nico and Leona rarely spoke of Red Bluff, but their eyes met often, saying what words couldn't. One night, under a sky thick with stars, Clara slept between them. Leona traced her lupin's petals. "Will she know what we came from?" Nico's voice was low. "She'll grow wild, not lost." They held hands, calloused and warm, the desert's quiet wrapping them like a vow. The past couldn't catch them, not here, where truth had carved a life from blood and dust. Dust settles in Socorro del Norte, where Nico and Leona, Mara and Tahan, carved justice from betrayal's ashes. Their stories of courage and sacrifice echo beyond the desert, asking what truths you'd fight for. Share your thoughts below. What moved you? What lingered? Your voices keep these tales alive, and I'm grateful for every moment you've spent with this journey. The West's winds carry more stories, and I'll be back to share them. Until then, keep chasing what's true, and let's meet again under the next starlit sky.